Does the hashtag resistance stand a chance against the Trump presidency? I'll ask one of the left's most prominent figures, Naomi Klein. I'm Mehdi Hassan. Also on the show, does Hollywood give cover and support to US wars abroad? What is the relationship between the entertainment industry and the military-industrial complex? That's our debate. But first, we're 6 months into the Trump presidency, and it's just one controversy after the next. Yet the president seems to survive and get through every scandal. So can the left, the so-called resistance, come up with a plan to stop him? Earlier, I spoke to the award-winning activist and author Naomi Klein. Her latest book is No Is Not Enough. Klein was a critic of the Paris Agreement, which she believed didn't go far enough in tackling climate change. So I started by asking what she made of President Trump's claim that he could get a better deal.
This is a deal that took a quarter of a century to negotiate. So this idea, the idea that, oh, we'll take another quarter of a century, get a better deal, right? Anybody who has wrapped their heads around just how little time, we have left to avert catastrophic warming, to meet the target set in the Paris Accord to keep temperatures below warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. I mean, we need to be moving so quickly. The reason I called it woefully inadequate is precisely because it is not legally binding, which is what allows Trump to so casually walk away. And I don't want to minimize this. This is a big deal. But the truth is that Americans don't get their energy from Washington, D.C. They get it at the state, from decisions made at the state level for the most part. Now, there's certainly things that can be done at a federal level to encourage states and cities to make the right decisions, but we already knew, whether they stayed or left the Paris Agreement, that the Trump administration was not going to be doing any of those things. They were not going to be introducing a bold carbon tax, which would have put in place the right kind of incentives. So it was really a debate between people in the Trump administration who wanted to stay but ignore it, and people who just wanted to leave openly.
And as you point out, it was possible to stay in and ignore it because it's not legally binding. Trump claimed it was legally binding, or he suggested that was the reason he was leaving. He lied and said, I need to free up our economy from all these global regulations. So given he knows, and he was told presumably it's not legally binding, what do you think the real reason was for him pulling out of Paris, even when his own right-wing advisors are saying, stay in?
Yeah. I think there's always a variety of factors, but I think he needs to throw some things to his base, right? And I think the things that Trump will throw to his base, and he has a hyper-nationalist, Breitbart reading base that basically thinks anything international and global is suspect by its very nature.
Conspiracy against America.
So, climate change is a hoax, but the very idea that the UN could be involved in anything is itself, unacceptable. So he has to throw that base something, because he's going to be betraying them on a lot of other fronts, right? I mean, already we're seeing him break his pledges to protect Social Security. He's breaking his pledges to protect people's health care. And so I think that Paris was just a cheap thing to throw to his base. And the truth is that even though a lot of American multinationals claimed that they were horrified by this, I mean, I think we should take a lot of it with a grain of salt.
You don't think there were? I mean, there were a lot of corporations that said, don't pull out of Paris. There were a lot of corporate leaders. There was the Elon Musks of this world who made a big, resigned from his advisory council, said, we don't support this. Even Rex Tillerson, his Secretary of State, who's former CEO of ExxonMobil, which has funded climate denial in the past, even he was one of the advisors saying, don't pull out of this. So you talk in your new book about the Trump administration being basically a corporate coup, but on Paris, the corporations were not necessarily on his side.
Well, let's look at Exxon and Rex Tillerson, right? Less than a month after the Paris Climate Accord was negotiated, Exxon, under Rex Tillerson, reassured its investors that they predicted that under the terms of the Paris Agreement, oil and gas would still make up 80% of the energy mix globally. Now, that is saying we believe that this accord is not worth the paper it's printed on, because if the temperature targets are real, we need to be really winding down in the next 20 years. By mid-century, we need to be carbon neutral.
You've said that the United States should face economic consequences, trade and economic sanctions, you say, over this withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. How would that even work? Which country would take the lead on sanctioning the US? Surely that's a liberal fantasy.
Well, I think that things can change. I don't think governments are going to lead this. I think it's going to be the people who lead this.
A people's boycott.
Well, I think it's going to actually start with boycotting the Trump brand. And I think gradually we're going to see pressure put on governments to take an increasingly hard line in the face of the Trump administration.
Okay.
And why not, right? I mean, Trump is threatening sanctions from everybody who doesn't, abide by whatever his latest dictates are. And I think it's a logical response.
Okay, so we'll come back to the Trump brand in a moment. Just before that, you and many other high-profile activists, commentators on the left were criticized for not actively encouraging people to vote for Hillary Clinton in last year's election to stop Trump. Given how narrowly Clinton lost and how catastrophic Trump has been, especially on the environment, even in his short time in office, do you regret not taking the stronger Noam Chomsky line, say, that progressives in swing states should definitely vote for Clinton to stop Trump?
I told people to vote against Trump. I didn't endorse Hillary Clinton. I did endorse Bernie Sanders because of his positions on climate.
He wasn't on the ballot paper in November, obviously.
Well, look, I was not trashing Hillary after she lost the primary.
But in terms of the choice, you're saying you did actually say after the primaries, vote against Trump.
Yeah, I did say that.
Naomi Klein, today you're at the forefront of what is often called the resistance against President Trump. You, of course, wrote the book No Logo about how corporations and branding had taken over our public spaces, our democracy. You wrote The Shock Doctrine about how supporters of the free market exploit crises, tragedies, disasters to get support for their policies. Is Trump, in many ways, a culmination of everything that you were writing about and warning about over the past 20-odd years?
Of a lot of it. And certainly what I was writing about in No Logo now almost 18 years ago, this rise of these super brands or hollow brands, where companies that understood that their product was not their product. No. Their product wasn't the sneaker or the laptop or the running shoes or the condo, but an idea, an aspiration. And so people started getting their identity through shopping, through their identification with brands. And Trump is a master at this. And his relationship with his base is not like the traditional relationship of a politician and the people who voted for him, who then hold him accountable. It is this relationship of celebrity. It's this relationship of identification, of deep identification. So when you attack Donald Trump, you are attacking them. That's the feeling.
And one of the resistance tactics you write about in your book in relation to corporations is culture jamming, where activists, quote, identify the big, bold idea a company is selling and then expose the dirty reality behind the shine. You suggest in your book applying that tactic to President Trump to hurt his finances and to hurt his image. But will that work? Because we've heard so much about Trump's finances, his business empire, the conflicts of interest, the lawsuits, and he's still standing. His business is still expanding. Nothing seems to stick to this guy.
Well, you're definitely not going to impact his brand by showing that he cheats, by showing that he lies, by showing that he treats people like garbage, because his brand is being the boss that gets away with anything. Yeah. His brand really is impunity that comes from tremendous wealth. I mean, this has been what he has been selling, and there is a market for it, particularly among men who feel that their power is diminished on various fronts, and he's selling this sort of cheap fix of easy power, right? That's why it's fun to identify with Trump for a certain psychology. There are some things that really do bother Trump, like saying he's not actually the boss, that somebody else is pulling the strings. I mean, President Bannon. I mean, look at how Bannon's public profile has receded. I mean, they've really been keeping him in a box. I still think he is politically influential, but it's clear that upstaging the president is not okay, because it does impact the thing that is most precious to him, which is his brand. But look, I want to be very clear. This is not going to be enough to take on Trump. The only thing that's going to beat him is an alternative that is actually tangibly improving people's lives with real good jobs, with better health care, free education, the economic populist program. And this is one of the reasons I supported Bernie. So would you I believe it is he is a way better foil to Trump.
So you mentioned
Hillary.
Bernie there.
Yeah.
Bernie's not part of the Democratic Party. He quit as soon as he lost the race for the nomination. Are Democrats getting the resistance to Trump right? Because there's a lot of obsession about Russia for very legitimate reasons.
Yeah.
There's talk of impeachment for very legitimate reasons. But is that allowing Trump to get away with awful healthcare bills, deregulation of Wall Street at the dead of night behind closed doors? Are Democrats getting their opposition and resistance to Trump wrong, in your view?
A lot of Democrats are. I mean, I think there are exceptions. I think Elizabeth Warren is trying to tap people on the shoulder and go, look over here, while everybody is talking about Russia, which, yes, needs to be fully investigated. I think there is certainly, enough suspicious behavior to merit that, right? It has to happen. But does it need to be 90% of the coverage on MSNBC? Does it need to be, do Democrats need to put all of their eggs in this basket? Whereas really going after this core broken promise that I'm going to stand up for the little guy, the working man, and looking systematically, connecting the dots between his tax policy, his healthcare policy, his attacks on regulations, and how all of it is systematically transferring wealth from the lower and middle incomes to the 1% of the 1%. I mean, I think that has much more of a chance of reaching Trump voters than focusing exclusively on this hope of impeachment by Republicans. Look, the Republicans are the only ones who can impeach Trump. Yeah. And they will only impeach Trump when they believe it is in their interest. And he's not advancing their economic agenda, which he is.
So a lot of the discussions around Trump and resisting Trump are full of doom and gloom. How do you stay optimistic, hopeful about the future in an age of Trump?
I mean, I'm not sanguine, I am frightened. On the other hand, we are in this moment when the neoliberal consensus, the ideas that have constrained our imagination for so long, are in complete crisis. And so those dangerous ideas are not the only ones that are rising in this moment. There is also a resurgence of progressive imagination, of boldness, and an appetite for it. And I think we saw this so clearly in the response to Jeremy Corbyn's campaign. And I guess what I'm trying to focus on is the fact that what is happening on the left side of the political spectrum is as significant as what is happening on the right side of the political spectrum and deserves our attention and our care and our planning.
There's a danger of complacency, isn't there, on the left? Because at the end of the day, Corbyn, wow, did really well. We all rightly point out the achievement. But he lost at the end of the day. He didn't actually win the election. Bernie Sanders did very well, came close to a historic upset, but still lost.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the left, genuine progressive candidates are coming closer to power than at any point in my lifetime, within arm's reach of power. The responsibility of this moment is tremendous. Of course, we can't be complacent, because if we can win, if we're finding that we can win, that a progressive majority is within reach, then we have to win. Bernie would have won if he had had a message that resonated with 50% of, just 50% of black voters, because Hillary got upwards of 90% in many states. Why didn't that happen? Why is this such a perennial problem for the left to connect deeply with the people who are most impacted by the ravages of economic inequality? But these are weaknesses that we have to be honest about, and we need to build a winning coalition.
Naomi Klein, thank you for joining me on Upfront.
Thank you.